right. Hello, hello. And let's see here. Go. Oops. All right. We are live. Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to do something a tiny bit different. And before we jump into all of the everything, we're just going to hang out for a minute. I have this nifty little countdown timer here, and I noticed that with these live events, I'm just kind of, jumping right into things and not giving people a chance to, like, oh, Dr. Lisa's online. Let me go see what she's up to. So we're going to hang out just for a minute and give our friends a chance to connect with us. But I'm so happy to hang out with you guys today. And how's everybody doing? Hello. Hi. Oh my gosh. Hi. Good to see you. Thank you for joining me today. I'm always so relieved when people show up to these things. So I'm like not just sitting here talking to myself. Oh, before we get started though, so today we're talking about self-esteem and self-love, and I'm just so excited for this topic. I also wanted to share that after last week's live stream, I always invite people to submit their questions, and I certainly want to hear what's going on with you related to, oh, well, thank you so much, related to self-esteem and what's going on in your life so that I can speak to your situation and hopefully give you some helpful advice. But I did have a listener reach out after the last live and was like, you know what? I have some questions that I want to ask you, but it's so personal that I feel kind of weird, submitting this as a comment on the socials where other people can see it, which is completely understandable. So since last week's live stream, I actually put together something a little bit different, which is a anonymous chatbot, basically, that I created for you on my website. I'll share the link with you. If you go to growingself.com/dear-Lisa, Dear Lisa, it'll pop up just this little chat bot, and it's like a little thing, and you can just submit your question online, and it'll pop up for me here as we're talking so that I can see it and I can speak to it, but it maintains your confidentiality so that it's a little bit protected for you, because not everybody needs to know sometimes the deepest, darkest secrets, understandably. So I'm going to make sure that I have this in front of me in case any of you want to submit a question for me or a comment. I always love to hear it. And otherwise, let's just jump right in. So first of all, we're going to spend a couple of minutes just generally talking about self-esteem, and I'm going to be giving you some information about really how this works, self-esteem, self-love, because I think it's always so important to have a conceptual framework, for me anyway, to like understand something. And then I hope that when we start talking about your questions, that we can kind of come back to some of this information to talk about how these principles around self-esteem and self-love may apply to you and your situation. So I have a number of questions that have come in already from you in advance prior to this, and I'll definitely be speaking to those. But if you have been, I don't know, maybe feeling a little vulnerable lately, struggling with self-esteem, not feeling as confident as you'd like to, or feeling like it's just been difficult to really feel like you are worthy of love and respect, even if you know intellectually that you are, because you are. I hope that you let me know what's going on so that we can speak to it in today's live stream. So, first of all, we're going to jump in and talk about self-love, self-esteem. And I have to tell you, this is just one of my favorite topics because so many different things hinge on this. I mean, everything from how happy we feel to the health of our relationships with other people, even, believe it or not, how easily you can achieve your goals, or whether it feels easy or hard to feel resilient and recover from difficult experiences. All of this is tied to your self esteem, your ability to love yourself, support yourself, take care of yourself emotionally and mentally on the inside. And so, this is a really important topic. I speak about this topic routinely on the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast, and I have a bunch of podcast episodes on this subject. So if you would like access to those, come to growingself.com, go into the blog and podcast section of my website, and from there tap on happiness, and that will take you to different content collections where we're talking about self-esteem and your relationship with yourself. And if you have specific questions, again, about self-esteem, self-love, I would love to hear what's going on for you. Or even if you have somebody in your life who's having like a hard time with this issue, we can talk about that too, for sure. So, let's talk about just a little bit around why this relationship with yourself is so fundamentally important. One of the things that many people don't realize when it comes to self-love and self-esteem is that other people tend to treat us the way that we expect to be treated. So if we are going through the world kind of energetically putting off signals like we're not worth that much, we expect to be treated badly, we probably deserve it, that tends to elicit negative responses from other people. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's important that you are clear and strong in your self-esteem and in your relationship with yourself so that you are able to not just advocate for yourself, but put yourself out there in a way that generates respect from other people, because then that turns into a self-fulfilling cycle. Additionally, we all tend to rise to meet our own expectations of ourselves. If you have a mental narrative kind of talking you down and it's never going to work, that's probably going to be true. And so if you aspire to more, to better, if you want to keep growing, there needs to be an active part of your mind that believes that and is telling you that yes, you can, in order to create motivation, but also the sense of control and ability that'll help you keep moving forward. And another thing is that we all typically make choices or take chances based on what we believe is possible for us. If we are closing doors of possibility for ourselves in our own minds, we don't take chances. We don't try to move forward because it feels impossible. So self-esteem and self-love is actually connected to our growth and development in this way. But additionally, when we are practicing self-esteem and self-love, and this I think is one of the most important parts, is that we tend to feel happier and more even-keeled, because a big piece of self-esteem and self-love is acting with love towards ourselves. So, for example, when we act with love, even if we don't always feel that way, I mean, think about how you behave towards a person that you love. You are reassuring, you're kind, you're supportive, you're encouraging, you lift them up and help them feel better about themselves instead of worse. And that often happens through dialogue, what you say, what you do. And so learning how to have this kind of relationship with ourselves and behaving in this way, in these ways towards ourselves, even if we don't always feel like it, is truly the key to loving ourselves, but also supporting ourselves emotionally, especially when we are going through a challenging time. One resource that I do have that I just wanted to put in front of you in case it's helpful, I developed a while back a self-esteem quiz so that you can take this just to kind of get an assessment of where you are currently on the spectrum of self-esteem. It's on my website, and this is what it looks like. So you just come to this page on my website and tap it to take the assessment. It'll ask you a bunch of questions that kind of digs into how you feel about yourself, how you talk about yourself, your relationship with yourself, whether or not there are growth opportunities here for you. And here's the link again if you want to check it out. And it's totally free, but it'll spit back this little report that's customized for you with different recommendations. So based on your scores, here are some things that you specifically can work on in order to grow in this area. So I just wanted to put that in front of you too, in case that's something that you wanted to check out now or in the future. Okay, so before we dive into your questions, and I am loving these questions. This is so amazing. I can't wait to talk about these. So, and if you have questions, please send them to me. You can send them in the comments. I'll get them. Or go to that nifty little thing that I shared with you at the beginning of our conversation, which is that growingself.com, Dear Lisa, in order to ask an anonymous question. So this is what it'll look like. You'll see a little chat bot. You can just get in touch with me anonymously, and I will not mention your name when I answer your question too, just so that you know. Okay, but let's dig a little bit more deeply into this and talk about what damages self-esteem, because I think it's really important for us to be aware of both sides, what damages self-esteem, and we're also going to talk about what builds self-esteem. But there can be some really surprising things related to our self-esteem, our self-love, how we feel about ourselves that we have never even considered could be factoring into our relationship with ourselves, and that often are very surprising for people. So I'll just run through these with you. And as I do, I'd like you to think a little bit around whether or not this is true for you or whether there are opportunities here for you. So, and also just to normalize this, I mean, we all go through periods where sometimes we feel more confident than others, right? And so some ups and downs are always normal. But there are other times when we might feel a little bruised, or when we are going through a period where we are not being our number one fan, right? We don't actually feel that great about ourselves. And some of the reasons for that can be subtle, and things that we don't even know that we don't know. One of the biggest things, honestly, that I've found with my clients is actually a skills gap related to self-esteem. So, and when I say skills gap, what I'm saying is literally not knowing how to be our own champion, not having insight into the way that we are talking to ourselves, which is often quite subconscious, and not having tools or strategies to be able to shift that in ways that change our internal experience. And this makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because, and I will say, and certainly everybody is vulnerable to this, I don't want to genderize it, but I think especially women are often socialized to be more humble, I think. Like we are talked out of, perhaps not overtly, but implicitly, believing that we're all that, right? Maybe if there were instances in our pasts, in our childhood, where we felt very proud or excited about our accomplishments, or wanted to tell people about something really cool that we did, or the feedback can be, you're bragging. Oh, well, don't you think you're great, right? I mean, like there can be some negative pushback from that. And so I think as kids and even teenagers, we're taught to hide, to be small, to hide ourselves, and it can also develop some ideas that people who think they're fabulous, right? There can be some negative connotations with that. And I think that that's in part where that skills gap comes from, is that we don't really have have healthy role models of people who are really confident, who believe in themselves, who have positive impressions of themselves in healthy ways. Again, like even in the culture, that can be associated with narcissism or, ego, overinflation. And so we have to fight through a lot of that, I think, in order to figure out what a healthy relationship with oneself should even look like or be like. Another reason that we can struggle with self esteem as adults is if we experienced a lot of criticism growing up, if we were never quite good enough. You got an A on the test and you came home and your dad said, "Why wasn't it an A plus?" Not that that ever, happened to me. Thanks, Dad. But anyway, those kinds of experiences can lead us to feel like we're never quite good enough, right? If we got a lot of feedback about what was wrong and not a lot of feedback about what was right, that can be detrimental. But interestingly, another thing that can lead to low self esteem in adults is actually overly protective parents. If you, throughout your life, have been really, really sheltered, if you have been protected from going out there and failing, quite frankly, and taking a few in the face and getting back up again, that can directly impact the way that you view yourself, because part of where self-esteem really comes from, and we'll talk about this more, but is through the experience of observing yourself do hard things. We teach ourselves who we are by what we do. And so if you were never challenged, if you didn't put yourself out there and go in and try hard things and fail and get back up again, there may be self-esteem and confidence muscles that you haven't had the opportunity to develop. Again, doing hard things and seeing yourself excel is actually part of how this works. And this is one of the things that a lot of people may not realize as one of the sources of self-esteem, but it's true. Another thing that can truly get in the way of self-esteem is something called a fixed mindset. This goes back into the research of Carol Dweck, who wrote the most amazing book on mindset, but talking about the difference between a growth mindset, the idea that we all develop and we have to work at that development. We have to challenge ourselves. We have to learn and grow and take action and make mistakes and have it feel hard and, keep moving forward anyway. That is how this works. In contrast, something called a fixed mindset is this idea that you're either good at things or you're not. And if you're not good at something, it means there's something wrong with you. Why aren't you good at that thing? It's like this all or nothing. And there's no space in this mindset for development and for hard work. And the fact that it actually is hard work to do hard things. But a fixed mindset that tells you that you are what you are and there's never any changing it. And if other people are better, whatever that means, better at something, it's because they're actually better people. And you are a less good person and it's not conscious necessarily, but that's how that mindset works. And many people have that operating in the background without being fully conscious of it. So a fixed mindset is oftentimes a driver of low self-esteem. And then additionally, when it comes to our beliefs about self-esteem and what it even is, we can collect unhelpful ideas about that. That self-esteem is an emotion. It is something that you feel, and it feels like by magic, like people are sort of blessed with high self-esteem or confidence. But going back to that growth mindset idea is that nobody has high self-esteem, and there's nothing that anybody's going to say to you that is going to give you high self-esteem. It's not like, being knighted, like, rise, now you have self-esteem. It is actually something that is developed through hard work, over time, and intentionally, with great effort. And I wanted to say this, not to make you feel exhausted by the prospect, but just to kind of reframe the idea, is that this is something that's grown. And so if you don't feel fantastic about yourself right now, that's okay. It just means that this is where you're starting and that there is growth work ahead of you. But you can't stay here. You can't wait and hope that you'll feel better about yourself. You actually have to do something about it. And so I hope that by the end of today's conversation, you'll have some ideas about what that might look like. Another thing that can be incredibly damaging to your self-esteem is if you tend to look for external validation from other people, meaning that you are looking outside of yourself for evidence of your worth, as opposed to having this voice inside of you that's able to tell you who you are. You are worthy of love and respect, and is able to support your confidence in yourself. When this is underdeveloped, we tend to look outside of ourselves. We seek gold stars, accomplishments, achievements, like, I am worthy because I did this thing. Or we start really over-indexing other people's good opinion of us. And that is how we know that we are worthy or unworthy, is by what other people think of us. And while this is certainly understandable, it is it never ends well because the truth is that other people, they're fighting their own battles, and they have their ups and downs, and sometimes they might like us and sometimes they might not. Sometimes that does have something to do with what we've contributed to the relationship system, but sometimes it doesn't. And when you are relying on other people to, determine your own self-worth, that is inconsistent. It is not a reliable source, and it can also create a lot of problems in relationships, particularly if it feels intolerable that somebody else may not think well of you. It makes it very difficult to take any feedback. Everything feels like criticism, right? And so that's not good either. And then certainly there can be other reasons why we can struggle with low self-esteem that go into more like clinical mental health type situations. For example, if you are struggling with major depressive disorder, one of the symptoms of major depressive disorder are feelings of low self-esteem, feeling shame, feeling hopeless, feeling helpless. Helpless is part of it, like incapable, feeling really down on yourself and also others, but especially yourself, like a very just sort of toxic self-narrative. That is a symptom of depression. So if you are attending this live stream thinking like, I really struggle with low self-esteem, and especially recently, it feels a lot worse, and it's accompanied by things like exhaustion, loss of interest in other things, like really just a sort of withdrawal from life, but this hopeless, helpless mindset, it could be that it's actually not low self-esteem. It's depression, and depression is treatable, and it is important that you get treatment for depression. So think about that a little bit further, and just, to explore with curiosity whether or not that could potentially be part of the picture for you. It is also true that people who have lived through very, very challenging or traumatic life experiences will often, on the other side of that, go through periods where they are questioning themselves and feeling down on themselves because of what happened in that experience. And this can absolutely be trauma with a capital T, like post-traumatic stress disorder. But additionally, I have found it to be really true with relational trauma. So people coming out of toxic relationships or very difficult breakups or divorces, especially where they felt rejected by their partner, that can also turn into feels like your self-esteem really takes a hit because of those experiences. And with the work that I do with clients with both me and at my practice Growing Self, we work with a lot of clients who are transitioning through breakups and divorces or coming out of toxic relationships. And one of the very important stages of healing from that is actually taking a look at what the relationship did to your self-esteem. And there are often a lot of other dark emotions that need to be worked through related to this, but a cornerstone of this process is repairing one's relationship with oneself after living through something like this. So it's really, really normal to have a lower self-esteem when you're going through something like this. But I also want you to know that it can be very reparable with the right support. You have to move through the stages. There's a whole recovery process. But if you get that kind of help, chances are that you can come out the other side feeling stronger and more confident than ever before. So I just wanted to say that. Okay, so I felt like it was important to talk about what can damage self-esteem. But before we move on to your questions, I do want to talk for a second about what builds self-esteem. And the good news is that you can absolutely work on this, as we've discussed, and that this work can be so transformative, truly, because again, going back to the very beginning, when you feel like you are worthy of love and respect, when you're having a positive relationship with yourself, it changes so many different things in many domains of life. So here are some of the things that can change your view of yourself. First of all, getting involved in personal development work that helps you take action and builds your felt sense of self-efficacy. Your ability to do hard things is one of the most important and most powerful things that you can do to build your confidence. And so, for example, working with a really good coach who is able to walk you through things that scaffold your success and help you take steps upward, it changes your view of yourself. Because as we do anything, our actions are communicating what kind of person am I? So, am I the kind of person that gets out of bed early and goes to the gym and invests in her health? Am I the kind of person who practices good self-care? Am I the kind of person who sets healthy boundaries for myself? Or am I the kind of person who doesn't do any of those things? Like we train other people who we are and what to expect of us, but through our actions and the things that we do, we are demonstrating that to ourselves as well. So that this is honestly one of the things that, in my experience, often needs to come first. People think that when they repair their self-esteem, or when that's the goal, they need to feel it first, or they need to change things internally before they begin behaving like somebody that has confidence and self-esteem. And certainly that can be part of the work, but not always. It's like that inside out or outside in. And actually, sometimes the outside in can be easier. It can certainly support the internal work that we need to do. And so this can include all kinds of things. So acting with love towards yourself, including self-care, including self-protection. And so self-protection could certainly be protecting yourself from mistreatment from other people. But in my experience, the biggest aspect of self-protection that most people need to do is protecting themselves from themselves, particularly if you have a very abusive internal dialogue that is super critical, that tells you all these horrible things about yourself, that anytime anything good happens, tears it right down, right? We need to protect ourselves from this, and learning how to protect ourselves from this kind of internal abuse can be incredibly powerful, very powerful, just as important as protecting ourselves from other people, certainly. So, other things that we can do to support the development of healthy self esteem and self love include things like mindset management, particularly around that growth mindset. And a big piece of this can also include avoiding comparing ourselves to other people. And to start, comparing ourselves to ourselves. So, stop looking at, oh my gosh, this person I know ran a marathon and I could never do that, blah, 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 as opposed to, you know what? Yesterday I walked around the block, and today I'm going to walk around the block twice. So we are comparing ourselves to our own progress and seeing ourselves taking incremental steps forward can be incredibly healing and helpful. Certainly, having healthy, validating relationships with other people can support our self esteem, but be very cautious about needing other people to validate us or make us feel a certain way. Nobody can make us feel good about ourselves. That is work that we need to do, that only we can do. So just know that. But certainly, if there are people in your life that tend to be emotionally supportive, kind to you, that treat you the way that you would like to be treated and that feel good for you, green light. And if you're in relationships with people who are essentially the opposite of that, it could potentially be time for some relationship curation, shall we say, if your goal is to be in a life space that really supports this idea that you are worthy of love and respect. Certainly, things like self-compassion are very important to practice, and also challenging negative narratives about yourself. Like if you have unhelpful core beliefs about who you are and what you're capable of, just getting really curious about those and skeptical of those. Because those can be difficult, I think, to see sometimes, much less change, it could be helpful to work with a really good therapist or a coach to crack into some of that mindset. And again, going back to that like skills gap piece that we talked about at the beginning, teaching you what to do instead so that you can shift that mindset. And absolutely, if in listening to this, like when I was talking about trauma or depression, if you suspect that this confidence or low self-esteem is coming from traumatic life events or major depressive disorder, getting treatment for that, appropriate treatment for that, is one of the best things that you can do. It can also be very difficult to find a good therapist, and many people don't know that there are different kinds of therapists. So just like, there's a doctor who's a general practitioner, and then there's a cardiologist, like different things, different trainings. Therapists are the same, and it's pretty easy to get involved with the wrong kind of helping professional. So I put together some resources for you on this. If you want to go to my website, I have 2 articles. One is how to find a good therapist, and the other one is called Evidence-Based Therapy, which kind of talks you through not just like the qualifications of a therapist, but what type of therapy do they practice and what types of therapy are good for what issues, because there are complexities here. So anyway, totally free. Just go to my website. I believe the main nav on my site has a free resources section, and that's where you would find links to those articles. Okay, so those are the general things that I wanted to share on the topic of self-love and self-esteem, just to give you a conceptual framework for what we'll be talking about. But now I really, really want to open this up to your questions so that we're talking about the things that are important to you. And thank you, those of you who wrote in with questions in advance. I will be sure to be answering those. But we've also had a few questions coming in from our wonderful listeners. Oh, this is an interesting question. And so let's just tackle some of these first. These are great. So, Embrace the Mud says, what a fun handle. So, how do we define self-esteem and self-love? This is an interesting one. And I guess I would define self-esteem as really how you feel about yourself, and that it is generally positive. To be in esteem is to have a healthy sense of oneself. I think it also needs to be balanced. I think that healthy self-esteem is reality based. I think that there is a balanced sense of what are my strengths. These are things that I like and appreciate about myself and that I feel good about. But I think that that also gives us the strength to be able to identify the fact that we have growth opportunities too, because I think that you have to feel generally secure with yourself to almost admit or work on, you know what, I have development to do in this area. So healthy self-esteem does not mean, there's some ideal of perfection. I think it's really strength in oneself and a security. And when I think of self-love, I think it's very much the same. It is having an emotionally secure relationship with yourself where you can trust yourself to be kind and loving towards you, and you can act towards yourself lovingly. And notice I'm using the word act a lot. This is different than feeling love towards yourself. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so in love with myself and all the warm fuzzies. And that's great to have feelings of appreciation or warmth towards yourself. But that's, I think, for most people, not necessarily the experience. I think it shows up more in actions. How do I talk to myself? How do I support myself internally? How do I essentially parent myself from the inside out? How do I take care of myself? How do I show myself kindness and respect? That's actually how this works. But what wonderful questions. I really appreciate that. Okay, so let's tackle another question. Oh, and if you would like to ask a question anonymously on this topic, so without your social media handle necessarily popping up here on my screen, you can do so through that anonymous form that I had mentioned. So it's growingself.com/dear Lisa, and I will be on the lookout for your question so that I can answer it anonymously. Okay, so here's a fun one. So hello in Amsterdam. What would be my number one tip for working on my own self-esteem? Okay. Some of this may have come up when I was kind of talking about what builds it, but I would say that if you really want to change the way that you feel about yourself, you need a multi-pronged approach, starting with actually taking stock of, if I were treating myself like I was worthy of love and respect, what would that look like? If I were someone who was worthy of love and respect, what would that look like? And distilling it down into the behaviors, the actions, the things that you would be doing, starting with very simple things. So you don't need to make a list of like all 30 things that you would be doing if you were perfectly perfect and on the other side of this, but just starting with one. And it could be so simple. I've had clients before who are just like, you know what? If I were a more confident person that believed I was worthy of good things, I would make my bed every morning because that would feel really good for me. I like getting into bed at night in a nice, clean, smooth bed with fluffed pillows, and it just makes me feel like I have my life under control when I do that. So that's the thing. And they just commit to beginning to do that one thing, one simple behavior, because that, again, it begins experientially retraining your brain that you are worth taking care of. You are worth having things that you enjoy. Another really important piece of this, in addition to finding even just one or two behaviors, I would drink more water. I would take vitamin pills, like whatever it is. Taking care of my health, hugely important. But is taking stock of what is going on between your ears when it comes to your self-esteem. Again, this can be challenging to do on our own because this is often very fast. Our thoughts are automatic, and they can be subconscious, quite frankly. Like we're not totally dialed into what our core beliefs are or what our mental narrative is. So we need to make this more explicit and overt. One great way to do this is through a daily journaling practice, which is just what am I telling myself, or even taking it a step further and like, I did not feel good about myself yesterday. What was I telling myself? What was that conversation with me like? Or yesterday was a better day. What was I telling myself yesterday? Just to begin to get some clarity and some insight into what this sounds like. One of the advantages of doing this kind of work with a good therapist or a good coach is due to this lack of visibility that sometimes I think, are all vulnerable to in our own minds. A good therapist or a good coach can help you talk through these feelings, can ask you the kinds of questions that will pull new insights out of you. And also, I think there's a quality of just being able to shine a flashlight on blind spots, essentially, or maybe reflect things back to you that are true, but that you didn't fully think of, because especially like a lot of these thoughts and feelings, they can be quite nebulous inside of us, but just somebody to help us crystallize what's true. But the first step is really we need to know what the narrative is, what those beliefs are, and having a process to make that more clear for ourselves is a really important first step. And then once we have that, the second piece of it is beginning to actively find more helpful ways of talking about things to yourself, verbally mediating things, going back to that mindset idea, like, am I engaging in a fixed mindset mentality right now? If I were doing growth mindset, what would I be saying to myself differently? And then actively practicing that over a long period of time, quite frankly, because for a significant piece of this, it's like needing to reprogram our brains. And this is not like an event. This is not a switch we flip. This is very consistent daily habits. So changing the way that we talk to ourselves like 20 times a day in different things, different ways. And it's going to be hard at first. And it's certainly hard to do consistently. But even like an affirmation practice can be really helpful. But over time, we rewire our brains. And in doing so, we're changing our relationship with ourselves. We're changing the way we talk to ourselves. And over time, that will eventually change the way that we feel. But behaviors are easiest. Thoughts are not as easy, but they're very powerful. And then the feelings tend to come last. That was probably an overly involved answer to your question. You asked for one tip on how to improve your self-esteem, but there you go. There's the process. These are such fantastic questions. And so let's just tackle this one really quick. And if you would like to ask a question, please do. We have until the top of the hour, and I'm going to speak to as many of these as I can. So I hope that you get in touch. You can do it here through social comments, and also get in touch with me anonymously if you're more comfortable doing that. growingself.com/dear-Lisa. Okay. So, Evan, you said, I wish I could be free and express myself. And I think the subtext is that it feels like there's a self esteem issue that is tricking you into believing that you can't. And so, obviously, I don't know a lot about what's going on here that's contributing to this sense that you can't be free, that you can't express yourself. I would be curious to know, are there external barriers? Like, do you fear consequences of what could happen? Or does it feel more like internal barriers? Is there a part of yourself that's telling you that you're not worthy of love and respect, therefore you shouldn't, be free and be more open? But it sounds like there's an opportunity for a lot of growth and exploration here. I would wonder if you're in a relationship with a good therapist or a good coach who can help you dig into this, or even engaging again in a journaling practice where you're like, what is that about? And perhaps even thinking about, okay, if I did feel free, what would that sound like in my mind? If I felt like it was okay to be myself, what would I actually be telling myself? And so, again, it's cracking into, what are you telling yourself right now that's tricking you into believing that it's not okay, versus what would that sound like if it were different, to get clarity and perhaps even experimenting with some of those differences. And then the other piece, too, again, goes into that, like, from the outside in. Are there very small, safe feeling, low key ways that you can begin, I don't know, telling somebody something about yourself like you just did here with us? I mean, hey, that counts. Or if you were being slightly more free, what would it look like? You would wear the colorful socks. I mean, I don't know. I can't define it for you. But just little tiny things where you begin retraining yourself. And it is, I am the kind of person that is free enough to, I don't know, something safe feeling, and then incrementally growing forward. So that would be my hope for you. But thank you for sharing. Another, ooh, here's a juicy one. Okay. I inherited my low self esteem from my mom. Thanks, mom. How do I handle having her in my life as I heal? Ooh. She remains very critical and will make strange personal comments when I am showing a higher self-worth. Oh my goodness, this is so incredibly insightful. Well, first of all, it sounds like you have been doing a ton of work on yourself, which is so amazing. You've really put together these puzzle pieces, like, here's where my low self esteem comes from, that you are essentially trained to have these thoughts and feelings about yourself through your relationship with your mom, and that a lot of it sounds like came from her criticism of you, that you then, understandably, we all do it, internalized, and that now it is difficult for you to be around her because she's, trying to do the same thing with a criticism. But that also, I think what I'm hearing is that, and tell me if I'm wrong, but that when you show up as somebody who is worthy of love and respect, it destabilizes the system a little bit, that is not comfortable for your mom, and that she pushes back on it. She wants to put you back in your place a little bit. And so, and I'll just say, like, this is deep work. And so this is going to require, like, some practice and some growth work over time. But what I would hope this could ultimately look like for you is, first of all, and this might be hard, but really practicing a different set of expectations for your mom. Like, when I talk to my mom, she is going to be critical, and when I exhibit confidence and high self esteem, it makes her very uncomfortable. And she's going to show me that and try to push me back into that position that was more comfortable for her, like she did when I was a kid. And even just expecting this very explicitly takes some of the energy out of it when you experience it, because there's no expectation that your mom could or should be any different. And so if you sign up to spend time with her, you are signing up to have this experience and set boundaries accordingly. Like, have a relationship with your mom, talk to her, visit her, but do so in ways that allow you to take breaks from that, get away from that. Like, if you're going to go visit her, maybe don't stay in her house, get a hotel, limit it to like, I am going to see you for lunch and then I am going to leave. Like, you know, if I can expect this kind of behavior from this person, what do I need to do as a person with high self-esteem who is worthy of love and respect and committed to taking care of myself? That I think can be really important. The other part of your question, how do I handle having her in my life as I heal? I think that this can actually be really interesting and really powerful. Like, okay, so, and this is kind of going back to parts work a little bit, which is one kind of orientation towards therapy. But it's like when we are struggling with low self-esteem and low confidence, we have a voice in our head that is telling us why we're not as good as other people. These are all the things that you did wrong. You should be ashamed of X, Y, and Z. You know, so and so is so much better at this than you are, like whatever it is. But to be able to draw a direct line between this voice, the experiential psychotherapists back in the day would call this an introject. It's like a splinter of somebody else's personality got lodged in your mind, in your psyche. And you're drawing a direct line between this voice in your head is actually your mom's voice. And so figuring out how you want to handle this relationship with your mom is actually doing the work of figuring out how you want to handle this voice, mom's voice, when it comes up in your head. So it's actually very powerful growth work. And what I've seen with, therapy clients is, to a degree, spending some time around a critical parent who kind of embodied this shame or low self-esteem inside of themselves actually gives them an opportunity to gain visibility into how they talk to themselves. Like, they can be so upset by things mom says or how mom treats them, but that really like haven't had a lot of visibility into that, oh, I do that to myself, don't I? Which can be uncomfortable, but also very, very powerful. And then figuring out ways of dealing with that. Like, what would you want to say to your mom? Like, Mom, thank you for sharing. And I respect your opinion. This is not really helpful for me. And I would really prefer if we could focus on my strengths and the things that you like about me, as opposed to the things that you would like to have be different. And going through how you want to then set those boundaries, because that's its own other set of growth work. But, the way that you might talk to mom could also be the way that you talk to yourself. Thank you for sharing. That is actually not helpful for me to be hearing right now. What would be more helpful is to remind me of this more positive thing that makes me feel more empowered. So I'm going to focus on that instead. So it's kind of doing it in both different areas. And with regards to the boundary thing, I've recorded a number of episodes of the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast on boundaries specifically. And I hope you check those out, because that is an art and a science all of its own. So you can go to my website, growingself.com, go to the blog and podcast. I'm trying to think of the easiest way for you to access this. I think actually if you go into the happiness section, there's a whole then content collection you'll have access to around healthy relationships. You can also get to it through the love. I have so much content on my blog and podcast. I've organized it into different sections so that people can find what they actually want. But if you go through the love section, I believe that the information on healthy boundaries is also available through communication that connects is another section that I put together. So either healthy relationships or communication that connects. Anyway, go mess around on the blog at growingself.com. I think there's actually also a search bar at the bottom. You can just type in boundaries, do it the easy way. Okay, fantastic questions. And we're just about at the top of the hour. Let me see if I can work in one more. Okay, so Ellie, oh, what a great question. How do I handle rejection after betrayal in a relationship and not compare myself to that other person? Oh, this is such a tough one. And so, from your question, that you were in a relationship and were betrayed, so I guess meaning that there was like an affair or infidelity, and now you're in a position where you're comparing yourself to the affair partner, essentially, and it's turning into mental narratives around that comparison, that self-talk around if I were different, if I were better, if I were whatever it is, that this wouldn't have happened. Why did my ex, seem to prefer her over me? What does that mean about me? And ugh. First of all, I just want you to know that this is such a difficult thing to go through and such a hard life space. And it is just so patently painful, and that it is the most normal thing in the world to be having these thoughts, having these feelings. Anybody in your situation can and does go through exactly the same thing. So I want you to know that you're not alone in this, and that this is a recovery process that I think probably also doesn't just get enough airtime in the world, is that many people can start to feel badly about themselves because they're having these experiences and they can't seem to move past it, not knowing that heartbreak recovery actually needs to happen in very distinct stages. It is a process, and the kind of emotional healing work that you're talking about is in like stage 5 of this process, where we're going in to these dark emotions and really processing them. And there is also another, and we're almost at the top of the hour, but I'll just share really quickly. There is another factor when it comes to this, which is actually not mental, not psychological, not emotional. It is biologically based, that when our attachment bonds are threatened or broken by an interloper, it just turns on this really old thing in our monkey brains that is connected to our biological survival system that results in self-denigration. I know this sounds like it crazy. So I've written about this in my book, Exaholics, Breaking an Addiction to an Ex-Love, if you want to check that out. And I've written about this on my blog at growingself.com, and I've recorded a number of podcasts on this topic. But one of the most important things that I can tell you is to not believe everything you think. There are biologically based forces at work in you right now, and this is a recovery process, and that by getting some psychological distance between these thoughts and not accepting them as reality, which takes some practice, granted, but by essentially using a top-down approach where you're able to really use discernment, be like, this is not helpful for me. This is making me feel bad bad. This is not good. And being able to potentially work with a good therapist or a breakup recovery coach around what does this need to sound like from me can be not just healing, but also incredibly empowering. Because, I think some of the hardest things for people going through this is feeling legitimately like you were victimized by this person that you loved and trusted, but that's not where it stops. The legacy of that is that now you're going into a space where you're essentially victimizing yourself with these beliefs and with the self-talk and with the self-esteem and the comparison. And so the learning how to shift that and move back into a space where you are operating out of love and respect for yourself and taking care of yourself in a more active way, protecting yourself from yourself. It's not easy work to do, but it's vitally important. And for many people going through what you're going through, it is one of the later stages of the process of healing. And I really hope that you are connected with a good therapist who understands those stages. I will tell you, most don't. I didn't, going through a master's degree and a doctorate, and no one taught me about any of this. I had to write a book on it to do the research and educate myself on this. I would invite you to come to Growing Self and book a free consultation with one of the breakup recovery experts on my team if you're not currently in a relationship with somebody where you feel that is like able to move you through this productively. So that would just be another piece of advice. But thank you so much for your question. And so, so we talked about all kinds of things. I really, really appreciate these questions. They are fantastic. And again, we can just review some of the resources that I put out for you. Everything, the articles, the podcasts we talked about are on my website, growingself.com. You can go to the blog and podcast section, check out all of those. Additionally, at the very beginning, let's see, where was it? I had my How Healthy is Your Self-Esteem quiz. If you go to my website, go to free resources, you'll find a link to that quiz. And then additionally, other free resources that I shared with you were, how to find a good therapist and evidence-based therapy, which are also articles that you'll find at growingself.com in the free resources section. Anyway, you guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I love these. I've only started doing live streams, not even 2 months ago. And this is officially my favorite thing. I look forward to doing this every single week. I love hanging out. I love hearing your questions. And so thank you for being here with me today. And I will be back here again next Thursday. So I hope to see you there. Okay, take care.